Went out to get some breakfast and I was listening to the latest episode of Pod Save the World with Ben Rhodes and Tommy Vitor, and they're talking about the the intentional starvation of Palestinian civilians inside the Gaza Strip, and the people who are tracking this stuff. There are 1.8 million Palestinians left inside the Gaza Strip. They've all been crammed down into the south, and a third of them are going days on end without anything to eat. Almost a 500,000 of them are existing in severe famine conditions. And famine like that does not have an on and off switch. And I saw a TikTok this morning from a young woman who I think she's a historian. I wish I could remember her name. And she was talking about World War II and the liberation of concentration camps and labor camps. And, you know, that the instincts of the liberating forces, you know, finding these tens of thousands of just emaciated people, largely Jews, and the instinct was to just feed them and to just give them food and give them as much food as they could. And that a lot of the people that they were seeking to rescue died from that because they had been existing in a state of famine for so long that just feeding them was such a shock to their systems that it killed them. And what I was listening to this morning, I heard a story of one volunteer at one of the, I mean, Israel as a policy decision outlawed UNRWA, the UN agency that had been handling food distribution in Gaza at 400 or 500 different food aid distribution sites. Israel made them illegal and made what they were doing illegal, and took over and started a food aid agency with the United States, and took those 400 or 500 sites and whittled it down to 4, and forced Palestinians who were already starving and who are unarmed to travel miles through active war zones to get to the aid distribution sites. And one of these volunteers said that at one of those sites, he was approached by a 4-year-old little boy who had walked 12 kilometers. And this little kid was skin and bones, and they didn't have very much to give him. And this little boy took what they had to give him, and the aid worker bent down. And this little boy put his hands on the sides of the aid worker's face and said thank you in English. And picked up what they gave him, and then the IDF opened fire on the crowd. Unarmed, starving Palestinian civilians. And Palestinian bodies started dropping. And this 4-year-old little boy died. And Benjamin Netanyahu responded to this by saying there is no policy of starvation inside the Gaza Strip, and there is no starvation inside the Gaza Strip. And I was very, very heartened to see the interview yesterday with Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin, who's an AIPAC moderate. And that interview is what the midterms are going to be. These two hosts were asking her if she regrets any of her votes for bombs. And Alyssa Slatkin said, well, there's a difference between offensive and defensive bombs. And they were like, will you at least say that you won't vote for further offensive weapons for Israel? And she wouldn't answer the question. And she takes huge amounts of money from AIPAC, and she's a Democrat, and she's a moderate. And I hope that interview is the blueprint for every race in the House and the Senate this year. The Democratic Party has to collectively, firmly, and very publicly denounce and cut ties with AIPAC. As opposed to on June 11th, when Benjamin Netanyahu visited the Senate and 8 or 10 Democratic senators clamored to get their photograph taken with him, including Amy Klobuchar, Chris Coons, Jackie Rosen, Cory Booker. We saw you hiding in the back, and a half a dozen more. Even the Pod Save America guys came around yesterday and said that Democrats should not be taking any more money from AIPAC. But irony is not strong enough of a word. I mean, seeing the Jewish state, which was established after World War II and the Holocaust, doing the same things to their indigenous population of Palestinian civilians that was done to them in the Holocaust, enthusiastically so. I mean, I read some polling earlier this week from Haaretz. Something like 47% of Israelis polled think that every single Palestinian in the Gaza Strip should be killed. 70% support the ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. And the Israeli government, the Knesset, just passed a resolution annexing the West Bank. There are 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank, and there's no Hamas in the West Bank. And the ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip is now the official policy of this Israeli government. They speak about it openly. And Democrats in the House and the Senate are complicit and still taking that AIPAC money. And I hope every one of them is labeled as such and hounded every single fucking day from now until the midterms because of that.